All right, so let's get some practice with learning about quadratics and some of the terminology as well. It's really good to get used to these terms that we're expected to see. Okay, so we're having a look at Space Corp, who has sent a lander to Mars to measure the temperature over a change in time. And what they learned is that the temperature, the changes of temperature over time, is shown by this quadratic rule that we see on screen. Now let's have a look at the 4 parts of this question that we need to answer. The first one says, what is the initial temperature? So the key word here is initial. So whenever you see initial, the first thing that you need to think of is that is the temperature when we start. And in terms of this quadratic rule, that will mean when our time over time is going to be 0. All right. So time is always put on the horizontal axis. In this case, it's written as hours. All right. So when we have the initial temperature, it's when the hours is 0. So when we have a look at this rule, what we need to do is we need to change the hours to 0. And if we get that, we get minus 0 squared, which is just 0, plus 22 times 0, which is again just 0, and then minus 21. So therefore, the initial temperature is going to be minus 21 degrees. Okay, but the second part of the question, it says, when was the temperature measured as 0 degrees? So again, the temperature is looked at on this axis, and we see 2 distinct points when it is 0. All right, so when it says when, we will need to reference the times. So the times at which it is 0 is when the hours equal 1 or when the hours equal 21. All right. Then we look at the next part of the question. It says, when was the highest temperature recorded? So again, we're looking at the vertical axis. The highest point from bottom to top is at this point, as you can see. And then if we go down, we'll notice that hovers above the 11th hour. So the answer for part C would be 11 hours. Then it says, what was the highest temperature recorded? So now you're looking at that exact same point, but we're looking at the temperature instead of the hours. So if we have a look at the temperature, we would draw a dotted line straight across or use your ruler and recognize that that is at 100 degrees. So the answer for part D is 100 degrees. Now, I just want to go through a couple of things to make this easier if you have this knowledge at hand. And that is that parabolas are symmetric about an axis of symmetry. So we know that for sure. Now, if we notice, we can see clearly that this graph, it cuts the hours axis at 1 hour and at 21 hours. All right, so what that means is that it's on the same side or same distance on the opposite side because we have an axis of symmetry where the parabola is the same on both sides of that axis. Okay, so if we know that, then we know the middle of these 2 points is actually going to be the point for it is at its apex or at its highest. So if this is 1 and this is 21, therefore the highest point in terms of hours is going to come at 11 because 11 is the middle of 1 and 21, or in other words, 21 plus 1 divided by 2 will give you 11. So that can help you answer part C, just a good point to note. Right. It's important to get practice with these questions and understand the terminology. So just to recap, initial is always at the start or the value on the horizontal axis, usually time, is when that is at 0. Okay? When we look for when the temperature is at 0, it's quite easy to see this. We can see that on the graph. When the highest temperature is recorded, we're just looking for that point which is the highest. And then we can find what time it is by looking directly down, and by looking directly across, we can see what that temperature actually is. Okay, so I hope that helped.